Welcome, Johnny, from the channel Millennials with Money. Thank you for taking the time to do this interview.
Thank you for having me, Tara, and congratulations on your 1,000 subscribers.
Thank you very much, and congratulations on your 3,000 subscribers.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so tell me about yourself, like where you're from, your previous and present jobs. Basically, set the stage for us.
Yeah, sure. So I'm originally from the UK. I come from a city called Newcastle. I grew up in the UK, and with work, studies, I've moved around. So I've lived in France, various parts of France, and I currently live in Madrid in Spain. And about my job, so I've worked in multiple different finance jobs, started as a financial controller, moved on to a financial analysis kind of role, and I've now progressed into a business partnering kind of role within a multinational company.
You're a partner in a multinational company?
Like a finance business partner.
You don't have to tell us your age, but that's a lot for someone in his 20s. You've advanced really far.
I'm at the very, very end of my 20s, yes.
Okay, so you've got this financial background, which should, it not enable you to give financial advice, but it should provide the perfect base of expertise to be able to talk about personal finance on your channel, which you do. I kind of view your channel as an inverse of ours, where you've got a ton of really practical personal finance, not tips, but stories. It's just kind of like which credit card for travelers works best, and these are the pros and cons. I think it's not like other YouTube channels where they're making predictions and saying they're not advising, but they are. I think yours is actually really different, and I think it's really practical. And then it was sprinkles of travel, and where I think ours is just the inverse of that. It's sprinkles of personal finance stories with a ton of travel. So yeah, does that background help you with your YouTube channel?
It definitely does. But the fact that I work in finance doesn't necessarily automatically mean, I'm someone who's good with finance. I've heard stories, not necessarily people I know, but I've heard other people talk about, they know accountants or they know people that work in finance who are good at their jobs, but, are perhaps terrible at managing their own personal finances. So the two, are not, how can we say?
Transferable?
Like they're not we can say they're mutually exclusive in a sense. That's what I want to say. Yeah.
You would think they would translate, though. You would think that if you could manage finances of an organization or department, you could manage your personal finances.
Yeah, I mean, in my case, it does, because I come from a family of finance. My dad is an accountant, and I'm a bit of an Excel nerd. So when I got to work in finance, and I saw all these like templates and models that we were using, and even just to work on my own Excel, like I would try and build like models and files for myself to help me with my own finances. And then kind of as time went on and I got my first real job, I realized, okay, things are not great for millennials from a financial perspective, generally speaking, but I'm not going to let that be my story. I'm going to really, double down, do what I can to take hold of my finances early, set myself up for, decades down the line. And because, there's a lot of, as I say, negative media, negative outlooks about, for my generation, for the generation after on finance. I wanted to share that, I wanted to help people and not have people feel that, the common narrative has to be the reality. That there is things that you can do, there are actions you can take to improve your financial situation. And that's where the idea for Millennials with Money came about.
The fate of our generation is not sealed.
It's not sealed, no.
Something is in our power, right? We can do a few things to improve,
absolutely, yeah.
To improve our situations. Okay, so is that why you started your YouTube channel?
Exactly, yeah. I started it really with the message of it started off as a blog actually. So it started off while I was living in France, as just a blog where I would write my thoughts. Right about that time was actually when I ended up moving from France back to the UK for a few months and then to Madrid. So it kind of went on hold. Then the pandemic came and I told myself, okay, no excuses. Like I've I really want to do this, like I should do what I can. And then it got to the point where I thought to myself, okay, if I really want to do this well, I should get on YouTube and make it a channel. And then as the channel's evolved, started as pure personal finance, and then as you say, like it's become a sprinkle of travel, international living, because I think it's, you know, part of life as well. It even has a link to personal finances, particularly when you think about, you know, opportunities for investing, opportunities for working abroad. You know, if we go into the whole like tax setup thing, that can also improve your financial situation as well. So I think, so what I try to really offer is, you know, beyond personal finance as well, kind of a perspective of, you know, a life thinking outside the bubble of what you've grown up with and what you've known as well.
It's really inspiring, and I think it's even practical from a tourist perspective. If you're visiting a country or a city, how much would a typical person spend? How much do things cost? There's a lot of overlap with travel and personal finance as far as cost of living and cost of travel. So I think, yeah, your channel is one of the most practical, dare I say, responsible personal finance channels out there on YouTube. Okay, so moving on, what brought you to Spain?
This story all starts in my childhood. So my family and I, we used to go on holiday to Spain every year, to the Canary Islands. And my dad actually, he got really into the language aspect of trying to speak Spanish when he came on holiday. And I quite enjoyed like the lifestyle, and well, you know, I'm a kid, I'm too young to understand really, you know, the whole Spanish culture thing. But I was old enough to recognize, you know, it was very different to what I was growing up with in the UK, and it was something I liked. So I always carried fond memories of Spain with me, you know, into adulthood. And then, you know, so I ended up, as I say, I was living in France around the time the whole Brexit thing was going on with the UK. And, you know, one of the advantages of being an EU citizen is having freedom of movement to go and work and live in other EU member states. So with the timeline ticking down on, you know, the UK's exit approaching, I thought, you know, I would really like to give Spain a try, and this is probably my last shot to really give it a go if I want to do it without too much hassle and paperwork. And I was able to find, you know, a suitable position that I was able to do, you know, like a remote position in a sense, that enabled me to go and move to Spain. And whilst, you know, wanting to stay, you know, I could have gone anywhere in Spain with this. I could have gone to Barcelona, Valencia, you know, Sevilla or something. But I thought, you know, long-term career perspectives and, you know, thinking about, you know, where all the big companies are, I thought Madrid was a suitable option. And it turned out, you know, I've really loved the city as well.
And I mean, we all know it's a fact that Madrid is the better city.
Facts. You said it in your video as well. I was happy to see that.
So how many years ago was that? I mean, what I'm trying to ask is how many years you've been living in Spain.
I moved to Spain, officially moved to Spain, end of January 2020. So right before the pandemic came.
Right before I arrived. I arrived at the end of 2020.
Yeah. So I've been here now. I've been now here for almost 4 years.
So it looks like it's working out. I mean, if you can stay for 4 years, you can stay. Okay, so what culture shocks or challenges have you experienced in Spain?
So the culture shocks when I'd moved here, because I'd lived abroad already in France, there weren't as much, you know, the culture shocks didn't hit me as hard as when I first moved from the UK to France, for example, or it wouldn't hit me as hard as if I'd moved from the UK to, let's say, Japan. Because, you know, as European cultures, you know, there is some proximity between countries, and particularly, you know, Spain is very special in its own cultural way, but it didn't hit me as hard. Probably what did kind of hit me the hardest, or caught me, mainly like meal times and the social lifetimes. Like I remember one time, this is a funny story. So I went to a club one time with my friend, and he said, "Hey Johnny, if we get to the club before 2 a.m, we get in for free." And I was thinking, 2 a.m, I'm thinking about getting my burger and chips and going home. So there's that. I mean, like the working hours as well, opening times of businesses. You know, in like most countries, they might run from, you know, 9 to 5 or 9 to 6 or whatever. In Spain, it's funny in the sense that a lot of businesses, typically, you know, places of administration, banks, pharmacies, they close over lunchtime, and that's a long pause. It's like maybe, you know, 1:30, 2 o'clock, businesses close for 2 hours or so, and then reopen again at 5. Or in some cases, don't reopen, or they close at 2, during the summer as well. So, if you're someone trying to get things done, it's not always easy to organize it around your working life.
Yes. And I remember the Puentes and all the bank holidays. There were so many times where I went to the bank, or even just a pharmacy or a place to get hair and makeup products, and they just weren't open. And people would say, it's a puente. And I would say, why are you telling me about a bridge? I don't understand. It's a 3-day weekend.
Yeah, that's true. That concept exists in France as well. So I was familiar with it, but any time one comes around and you've got something that you need to do and someone reminds you, you're like, oh, yeah, of course. So now this is going to drag out a little bit more.
Yeah. And I notice the businesses will stay open quite late, though. If they come back after lunch, they reopen, they're open till 8. I mean, people are getting off of work at 8 sometimes. And so the workday is very long for some Spaniards.
Yeah, I think historically it has been like this, but in recent years it has been reduced to a more standard working hours day from a rest of the world perspective, maybe.
You say you got a job that enabled you to move to Spain. How difficult was it to get that as an EU citizen? You were an EU citizen at the time. This is pre-Brexit. And then can you talk a little bit about that and how difficult it would be for a non-EU citizen to get a job in Spain?
Yeah. So as an EU citizen, typically, you've got the right to work in any other EU country and be treated as a citizen of that country. Obviously, there's certain safeguards in place so that countries can protect their national interests. Like if you move there without a job, then you need like a certain amount of money in the bank and whatever to register as a resident, etc. In the case of moving to Spain, because I'd already done a short stint in the country, working in a hostel over summer, basically, I already had pretty much all my documents in place, like a social security number, like a NIE. So for me, it was really easy to just go to the company and say, look, here's my social security, here's my NIE, and they were able to, enroll me on a Spanish contract like that.
Wow. Would you say that's a typical experience that an American would experience, or Canadian, or
So for a non-EU citizen to get a job in the EU, like an employer has to be able to prove that they haven't found a suitable candidate within the EU, within that country or within the rest of the EU, in I think it's 90 days from when they publish the job. So obviously, you've got about 300 million people living in the EU. So there's it's highly, highly probable that they will find someone within the EU, unless you're in a very highly specialized field where, they are given like skilled work visas or something like that. It can be very difficult from outside. What some people I've heard do is, they kind of come on study visas, study a language, and then use that as a bridge into, working somewhere. But, of course, it's not guaranteed, and there's an initial financial outlay.
Right. And I've heard the Spanish labor market is very tough. The unemployment is high, and
unemployment is high. Maybe a friend of mine told me, in skilled professions, like it's maybe a bit of a different story. Like if you're skilled, it might not be so hard. But yeah, you are right that unemployment in Spain has typically been quite high. It has reduced, but still a bit of a challenging labor market.
Well, I heard that youth unemployment is really an issue in some, especially rural places like Extremadura. It can be quite high, and then wages are a bit depressed. Like the salaries are a little lower than other countries.
Yeah. I guess it really depends, of course, as you say, where you live, and what area we're talking about here. But particularly, as has been the case, around the world, inflation has gone up. Inflation has been quite high over the past years. It's slowing down now. It's becoming under control, but it's still not at the EU's, inflation target. So they are trying to still control it, and as a result, prices have still been going up. Of course, the situation in Eastern Europe has had an impact as well.
The war in Ukraine, right? Yeah. Okay, so what are some of your favorite things about Spain?
The general lifestyle in Spain I really like the weather, the culture. I'm going to try and link this all together because I'm spouting words here, but it does all link together. For example, in the UK, you come out of work at like 5 o'clock, it's dark, it's cold, you want to go home, just sit in front of the sofa and watch TV. But in Spain, you come out of work at 5, it's still light. Even in like the winter, you've got like an hour of sunshine until maybe about 5:30, 6 when you finish. And the weather's nice. You can go home, you can do stuff at home, but if you do want to do things outside, like go for a walk or sit on the terrace of a bar and have a drink, then you can. And it's very common in Spain as well. Fantastic gastronomy, great food, of course. I think these are my main things. Like aspects of the culture that contribute towards a nice lifestyle. And the fact that you can you're in Madrid, you can get to the beach within a couple of hours, as well. And you've got Spain from a geographic perspective does have quite a lot to offer.
A lot of coast and a lot of different environments. I mean, environments so different. I feel like just traversing Spain is you'll come across as many environments as traversing an entire continent.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you've got the south of Spain, very sunny, all the beaches, all that kind of stuff. Madrid, which is a big metropolitan city, and then you got the north of Spain, which is a bit more of a temperate climate, a bit cooler. A lot of people actually went on holiday up there this summer because it was just so hot in Madrid and in other parts of the country.
And yeah, Galicia is like as green as England and Ireland, and it's rainy like England and Ireland, and then you've got some desert areas of Spain, and you've got glacial rivers. I mean, snow-capped mountains. I've seen every environment I can imagine, basically. And I think the Spaniards live their lives outside rather than like in their apartments or houses.
Agreed. Yeah.
Okay, good. So what do you invest in? Not what do you recommend people invest in, but what do you invest in?
So I personally invest in, if you look at my overall portfolio of assets, primarily now ETFs and index funds. There was a point where I was investing in individual stocks, but less so now because of the time that is required, the research that's required to do it, and I simply don't have the time for it anymore. So to simplify the investing, I put the majority in ETFs and index funds. I have, if you've seen my channel, 2 storage units that I bought, one last year, one this year. This is like my, let's say, mini real estate or my baby steps into real estate investing. So getting started there, I have 2 storage units in Madrid that I rent out, and that generates me a small monthly income. Not quite that of a a residential property, but still a nice little monthly income. I have a very, very small amount in cryptocurrencies, in Bitcoin and Ethereum. I don't put a lot in there because, I believe there's perhaps some upside potential, but, it's very uncertain and it's not something I'd be willing to put a whole amount of my portfolio in. And those are pretty much the main things that I invest in. From my perspective.
You also bought a house in Spain, which I think is not the easiest thing for a foreigner to do. I thought that was very brave and fascinating. I watched all of those videos. We wanted to do it ourselves and we chickened out. So can you talk a little bit about what that process was like? And sounds like you don't view it as investment because you live in it. So yeah, go ahead.
Sure. Well, today I don't see it well. There are 2 ways to look at it. There's, yes, it's a use asset right now. I did buy it with the hope to further down the line rent it out to someone else. Whether I'll still do that now, I'm not sure. We'll see. But the process in itself, so I essentially started looking. You do your visits, you come up with an offer, negotiate, then you sign what's called an arras in Spanish, which is a reservation contract for the property, where you've agreed in principle a price, you pay an amount up front, typically to the estate agents if that's who you're going through, or to the seller if you're doing it without a third party. Then you'll go through all of the due diligence, you get the property evaluated, you go through the mortgage application process at the same time. Probably it's a good idea to start that before you start your property search. At least get some kind of, understanding of what you can permit, like what your financial capacity allows you to do from that perspective. What property value are you able to go for? What is the monthly payment that you can handle? Then once all of that's out the way, then you go to the notary's office and you sign the property sale at the notary, and then that's it.
The rest is history. You make it sound so easy, but I recommend viewers look at your series of videos because you did a few on that before they...
Absolutely, yeah. I talked through it in a very, very high level there, but yeah, of course, there are a lot of details in the process regarding, mortgages, regarding what to look for in buying a property.
It's a lot, but that was a great, concise summary. Thank you. Okay, so you talked about what you invest in. Is there anything that you want to start investing in that you wish you could if you had the time or the money or the knowledge?
So more like residential property, I would say, like whether it's, a long-term rental or even a mid-term rental I found out about today, or kind of a holiday rental. It's something that, I need a bit more capital to do. My situation today could probably do it, but my risk tolerance internally doesn't allow me to, throw my money at something like that right now. I would like to get to, a very, very stable situation where people talk about having deep pockets for real estate. That's something from the Money Guy show. I'd really like to get to that situation before I throw myself at something like a holiday apartment or like a residential real estate rental.
That makes sense. I think you're like me, cautiously optimistic.
Yeah. You have to be in some senses. There's two sides to the coin, of course. There is some risk involved ultimately with any investment decision. You have to have some kind of, willingness to take a risk if you want to see any reward. But you've also got to be diligent in how you invest as well. Not do something, without doing proper due diligence, thinking about what the potential future consequences are and understanding if you can accept what the potential future consequences are. So when I bought my house, I thought right from the moment of buying it, I thought, what point in time am I going to sell this? What is the worst possible situation I could find myself in whilst having this house, and would I be able to survive it? And running my analysis at it, yes, even with the worst possible scenario being improbable. So that was what gave me the peace of mind to be able to go ahead and make such a big decision.
That is a really good exercise. I think everyone should go through that before they make an investment. Imagine the worst scenario, then ask themselves if they could still afford the investment. And then if the answer is yes, go ahead. And we're not giving it advice. I just really like that.
I mean, I'm a notorious overthinker, so something like this really was really necessary for me to put myself at peace with the decision, like when I was going to go through it.
Okay, so are you doing any version of FIRE? Because you talk about FIRE in some of your videos, and you'll say that you're not. But then you'll say, well, your FIRE number would be this. So I'm just a little confused. Can you clarify this for our audience?
Sure. So FIRE is a funny concept. Let's split it into two parts. Let's split it into FI and let's RE. Financial independence, absolutely. I'm for this, and it's something that I'm actively pursuing. For me, financial independence is being able to, having the freedom to do what you want with your life, when you want to do it, and wherever you want to do it as well. So for me, financial independence in that sense means, you don't rely on one source of income. That's why, I've started with the mini property investments and looking at other ways to generate additional money. So that, if one day, thank God they become like your main sources of income, then you decide what you want to do. As I've said to you and as I've said before, I enjoy what I do for work. It's something that, I'll continue to keep doing as long as the work is there. So for me, financial independence is being able to go to work because I want to do it, and knowing that if something were to happen, I have other, financial resources to keep me afloat. Retire early is the problem I have with this concept, because, you know, people sell it as, I'm going to sit on the beach in Bali, not do anything, whilst my 10 properties in the UK pay for my lifestyle. But in reality, if you look at all of these people, like, they're doing something still. They're selling their course, or they're, you know, making YouTube videos about their lives. And it's what they're referring to when they say retire early, in my mind, is being able to leave the obligation of going to work, which is fine. If someone wants to do that, then fine. But for me personally, I'm a big believer in having purpose in life, and I want to have purpose with what I do. That's the reason why I will continue to work, whatever that may look like, once I reach financial independence.
You're so right. I feel called out. I'm one of those people who fired at 38, and I thought I would just be enjoying cocktails on the beach for the rest of my life while my property is paid for this permanent vacation. And the first year started off that way a little bit. I mean, I was in Madrid in winter. Well, there's no beach in Madrid, but I was, you know, going to brunch and doing yoga every day and running by the river. And I just thought, well, I'll just have a fantastic social life and go shopping every day. But I needed structure and routine. I missed my colleagues. I needed purpose in life. I wanted to be working on something important, and I used to be somebody. So eventually I you know, started my own firm and started working 5 hours a week, and then 10 hours a week, and then 15 hours a week. And at what point are you no longer part-time, and you've officially gone back to work, but just in a different capacity on your own terms?
Exactly. That's the key thing. Like, you know, it's life on your own terms. Like, if you want to keep working 40 hours a week when you've reached financial independence, fine. If you want to do 10 hours or 5 hours a week, it works as well.
Yeah. I think my issue was it was never just 40. And I think had it been just 40, I wouldn't have burned out. But, you know, if you're salaried, sometimes you just feel like the organization owns you, because you got to justify that salary. So you've just got to keep working and making your program better. And every time you're not working, you're thinking about work and how you could improve, because you've got to justify this salary and these benefits. And so you're working 60 to 80 hours a week in hopes for a promotion or a successful program, whatever it is you're delivering. So that was something that I struggled with, and I never was able to figure out how to do that when I worked for an organization. But when I work for myself, the situation just sort of resolved itself. It's just sort of like however many clients you choose to take on. You can really limit yourself that way, and then the problem kind of takes care of itself.
Yeah, I think that's true. It's like, if I look at my YouTube channel and I wonder why, for whatever reason, it's not growing at the same speed, it's because I haven't done this. And I'm like, okay, because I didn't do it. Fine. Okay.
Johnny, you have 220 videos. You're a machine. Your YouTube channel's growing so fast. And it's not just because of how hard you work. It's because it's really good content. It's really focused. You know, yeah. I recommend everybody check out your channel. Okay, so what do you think are some important differences between investing in Spain, the UK, and the US? Or more broadly, can you speak to differences between investing in Europe versus the US?
I think, first of all, you have the currency, because I think as Americans, you have, you know, a whole load. You have basically the biggest stock market and biggest, you know, companies in the world. If you look at like the world indices and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think the first thing is currency, because, you know, as Americans, you have pretty much the biggest companies, and they take up the biggest share of, you know, if you look at the Vanguard World Index, you know, the US stocks account for probably about 65-70% of that index. So in your minds, it probably makes sense to just look at the US market, and dollar investments in that respect are probably going to make up the majority of your investments. Whereas in Europe, you know, the same truth is still applicable. You know, US companies and stocks probably still make up the majority of people's portfolios, or are probably something that people look to first. But from our perspective, we're holding British pounds, we're holding euros, we're holding Swiss francs, whatever other currency. So we have, the currency impact to take into account as well. So, a stock can do well, but if the dollar is I need to get this the right way around. If the dollar is going one way against the currency, which is unfavorable, let's say, then it can wipe out all your gains. Investors in Europe can always look at, currency leveraged ETFs, so they can look at investing in an ETF that's, denoted in their currency, so that they have some kind of shield or some kind of, protection against the currency risk. That's the first thing. And then the second thing I think really comes down to, tax and how investments are taxed, because obviously each territory has its own different tax rules when it comes to dividends, when it comes to capital gains, all that kind of stuff. For example, I could have, 500 euros of capital gains in Cyprus, living in Cyprus, and as a Cypriot tax resident, I don't pay capital gains because Cyprus doesn't tax capital gains. In Spain, they do tax capital gains, and the rate on which they're taxed depends on what your overall gain is. In France, there's social charges on top of investment gains as well. So there's that, and there's also in the US you have 401ks, Roth IRAs, tax advantage products. In Europe, like with the exception of the UK, which I think blows everyone out the park, the tax advantage product offers are just not the same. Like in Spain, the best tax advantage you can get from investing is investing in an employer pension plan where your employer gives you a match of however much is agreed with the company, and then whatever you contribute in that year is taken away from your base, how can I say, tax base and your salary in the rental declaration, in the income declaration. So let's say I earn, I don't know, 40,000 euros a year, I pay 1,500 euros into a pension plan, then I only get taxed on 38,500 euros because that is kind of deferred tax down the line. But that's got nothing on a Roth IRA or a 401k. The only thing, as I say, that comes close is the ISA in the UK, where you can contribute up to £20,000 a year. You can do it through stocks and shares. And any gains, capital gains or dividends are tax-free.
I might get you to write that down. I'd like my viewers to know about that. So what I'm hearing is Europeans, not only can they invest in the US market, they often do, even without knowing it. In their retirement portfolios, they'll be the stocks of US companies, automatically.
For sure, yeah. The majority of pension plans, I would say, are very linked to the US, market.
And if they want to independently invest in US stocks and index funds, where they can control the trades, is there a certain step they need to take? Do they need to go to a brokerage firm and get a broker to do it for them? Or can they download an app like a Robinhood or whatever and just do it?
Yeah, absolutely. There are apps in Europe like Trading 212, like DeGiro. Interactive Brokers is a popular platform as well. There's loads of different platforms out there where you can do it. The only thing as a European that you'll have to fill out is the W8 Ben form, which is something to do with US dividend double taxation. But yeah, essentially on these platforms, once you've passed all the necessary checks to open an account, you should be able to invest in US individual stocks.
I'll get you to write that down too. And you know what? You probably cover all of this on your channel. I'll just link to certain videos. This, yes. Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm caught. I haven't watched every video on your channel. I should. Shame on me. Okay. All right. So we had an interesting discussion a few years ago about the differences between student loans in the UK and the US. So can you talk a little bit about that? Because for number one, I was surprised to know that British people, or people who go to school in the UK and are nationals, they are residents or citizens, not like an American. I did my master's in the UK. Obviously, I had loans from that. But people like you, that they had loans at all. I thought that university was free, or not free anymore, but it used to be. So it cost so little that you wouldn't wind up with loans.
Yeah, so what you're referring to are like public universities in Europe. So, for example, in France and Spain, you have them as well, where you pay little or no money to go to university. That's public universities. In these countries as well, there are, of course, private universities. Like myself, I did part of my master's at one. Andrea, actually, like my girlfriend, she studied at one as well. So students do pay for them, where they get, it's typically the ones that you pay for are like the creme de la creme, like the very, very top business schools or universities in a particular field. So they do exist. Then we have the UK, which if I'd known it was going to be like it is, then I perhaps would have looked for a university in Europe where I could have gone for free. But tuition and going to university in the UK, the costs are very much similar to the US. They're astronomical, and very few people can afford to pay for them privately. What the difference we do have in the UK though is in terms of the repayment terms. They're a lot more generous than in the US. So so if I understand correctly, in the US, you have federal student loans and you have private student loans through institutions like Sallie Mae, for example. You borrow the amount of money you need, and then the moment you graduate, they're due for repayment. They stick with you until you die, unless, in the very rare instance, you have like a forgiveness program. Is that more or less the situation?
You know the US market really well. Things might be changing because the interest that was accumulating on loans was paused from COVID up until maybe now. And there's talk about it either was recently unpaused or extended. I have not kept up with it, but there are, if you're a teacher, if you work for a nonprofit for 10 years and you apply, you can get some of your loans beyond a certain amount. If you made every single payment for 10 years, you can get the rest forgiven. But a lot of people were applying for those programs and being denied, and actually most of them during a certain time period. And so then there was the federal government revisited that, and I think more people's files have been pulled, re-examined, and they've had their loans forgiven. But for the rest of us, no. You just you can't declare bankruptcy. It's the only type of debt where you can't declare bankruptcy, and students own hundreds of thousands of dollars. I think the average is 40 or 50,000 for an undergraduate degree. I'll have to check that. I'll be putting that exact number in the video. Yeah, that's our system.
So in the UK, you'll be surprised to know, actually, the majority of student loan debt is forgiven. Probably about 70 to 80% of students currently, because they introduced new rules this year, won't clear the full amount of their loan. And you'll basically there's different types of plans. There's Plan 1, which is like students who went to university before 2012. Then you have Plan 2, which is like 2012 up to 2023, and then the new one they've introduced, I think it's Plan 3 or Plan 4, and it's for anyone from now basically who goes to university. So Plan 2, sorry, which is what I'm on, is basically if you haven't paid off the balance of the loan in 30 years, it gets cancelled. So, and you only pay back about 10% over a certain threshold of what you earn, and I think it's £27,500 in the UK. And then if you live overseas, which, is not the case for many people, then the threshold gets adjusted based on the cost of living in that country. So unless you're making like serious money or really, really big money, then, the majority of people, it doesn't make sense for them to overpay or to pay it off early because, they're not going to clear the full loan, and they'll probably pay less over their lifetime than what they paid to go to university. There's even cases where, this wouldn't be an ideal situation for someone, but if someone never earned over the threshold, then they would never have to pay back and they went to university for free. And if you lose your job as well, then you don't have to pay back whilst you're unemployed as well. So,
geez, that system makes so much sense. Why don't we have that?
Yeah, it's almost, it's in the UK. We have a popular finance influencer called Martin Lewis. He describes it, it's not really a loan, it's more like a graduate tax, because you pay based on what you earn, and after a certain period of time, it's gone.
I am just green with envy. Let me move on to the next
Well, I
question
mean,
so my head doesn't explode. Go ahead.
It's good in that sense, but at the same time, you get to a point when you do start paying back, and people in the UK probably don't really feel it because it's deducted from their payslip automatically. But if you're living abroad and you're making the manual repayments, then you start to feel it a little bit. You got a few £100, a few £100 equivalent going back to paying off your student loan. It does get a bit frustrating. So if I'd done it differently, I probably would have reconsidered, the amount I borrowed when I went to university. But because the repayment terms are what they are. Like your debt could be £100,000, it could be £1,000,000. But if you're earning £30,000 a year, then it doesn't matter what your balance is. You've got to pay back essentially, the corresponding amount. Yeah.
Still a better system than we have.
The US system is a bit brutal. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so the next topic is really related. And I think you've already partially answered it at the beginning of the interview, but it's basically, what predictions do you have for our generation? I'm an older millennial, right on the border between millennial and Gen X. And you're, I think, the classic millennial, right? Like right in the middle?
I'm actually right at the end, but my preferences, my behaviors, what I'm into is more that of a classic millennial. Yeah. Let's say that. So to answer your question, as you noted, I don't like to give predictions. I don't like to, try and guess what might happen. What I will say is, though, is that there will always be opportunities to do things better. There will always be opportunities to, explore something else, to go somewhere else. Like there are countries, the invent and the opening of digital nomad visas around the world is making, traveling abroad, moving abroad a lot more accessible for people. Obviously, people within the EU, you have fantastic advantages to move between countries. And just the internet in itself, has made business a lot more competitive, has made opportunities for making money like a lot more available. So I think there'll always be opportunities, no matter which way things go, to improve something in your financial situation.
What an optimistic note to end on. And I love that you incorporated digital nomad visas. I mean, you can always go somewhere else if your economic situation of the country you're born in isn't working out for you or your generation. You're never trapped. Especially with our channel, She Saves, He Invests, They Travel. We do want to talk about these different types of visas and the process of immigrating and living and working abroad. So I normally would just end on that positive, hopeful note, but I heard a rumor. I did hear a rumor. I know for a fact because I've hung out with you that you could do accents. Is there any accent
yes.
you'd be willing to do that would not get you in trouble?
Exactly. I don't want to get cancelled.
Yeah. How about like a Southern American? That's a tough one.
What can I say in a Southern American accent?
Oh, you almost did it, didn't you? Just do it right now. That's tough for a British guy.
Huh?
That's tough for a British
What
guy.
could I possibly say on this podcast? Don't get me cancelled.
You sounded... That was really good. That was better than most Americans' ability to do a British accent. That was really good. I wish you did the whole interview in that accent.
Oh man, no, I'd be like flagged for copyrighting Dave Ramsey or something like that. Yeah, I love you, Dave. Don't cancel me.
That was great. That was great. Thank you so much. And everybody go check out his channel, Millennials with Money.
Thank you so much, Tara. It was a pleasure.
Bye.